Greetings and thanks for viewing our presentation on student leadership. This research was sponsored by the Round Square organization, and it aims to probe student perspectives about leadership. Interestingly, the notion that students can be leaders and should be given the opportunity to lead has really taken off over recent years. In this quotation from William, we get a sense of why this is the case. The notion that youth should have self-efficacy to shape the world that they live in. So leading off from that idea and that understanding, this research that we've conducted is unique and somewhat groundbreaking. Most research to date on leadership takes adult perspectives and workplace perspectives, and we know very little about how students perceive and experience leadership themselves. So this research aims to get an understanding of the student experience and how they articulate and perceive and what they believe about leadership. And we know that this is important given the role that schools have in shaping, at least potentially shaping, students as leaders. This research was conducted in Round Square schools, and that adds a certain value and opportunity for us in doing this research. Round Square was established in 1966 and inspired by the philosophy of Kurt Hahn. And today there's over 200 like-minded schools across over 50 countries. Round Square has a certain commitment and that is shared by its schools. 6 ideals: international understanding, democracy, environmental stewardship, adventure, leadership, and service. So of course, this research hones in on the leadership aspect. These are mostly private schools or high-end public schools. And so they've got resources to integrate leadership experiences into the curriculum and into extracurricular activities. So by doing a Round Square study, we have the optimum opportunity to uncover aspects of student leadership. So in this presentation, I'll carry on and look at our questions and the data collection that we use to uncover these ideas about student leadership. My colleague Ewan Wright, who was the principal investigator, will share the findings and how we've shaped these around 3 key propositions for schools. And then we'll go on to Professor Allan Walker, who will share what this actually means for schools. So we had 3 questions that drove this research. The first was, how do students conceptualize leadership? How do they build leadership? And how do they perceive the impact of student leadership? Now, keeping with our whole philosophy and agenda of student perspective and student voice, this research really had 2 key strategies. One was a large-scale survey of 6,760 students, as well as teachers in Round Square schools, covering 34 different countries. But really interesting and exciting, I think, was we employed a strategy of having students themselves conduct the interviews with their peers and with teachers. And that occurred in 12 case study schools across 11 countries.
Thank you very much, Darren. So now I'm going to talk you through some of the key findings from the research. To start with, here is a proposition that we developed based on the findings about how the students view effective leadership, or what effective leadership looks like. The students believed that communication, confidence, honesty, responsibility, and listening skills are the most important qualities of effective leaders. They also reported holding more systemic than hierarchical leadership attitudes and beliefs. Although many perceived an intergenerational gap with adults, there was more that united students and teachers than separated them in conceptualizing leadership. Both groups valued leaders who support and positively influence others whilst working collaboratively towards a shared objective. Now, let me talk to you about how we arrived at this proposition in relation to the research question, how do students conceptualize leadership? In the survey, we asked students to free write the most important quality of an effective leader. And this was a completely open question with no constraints about what students should or could write. The most important qualities that they noted were confidence, communication, honesty, responsibility, and listening skills. In the interviews, the students elaborated on these qualities as being really valuable for leadership. Overall, there was a strong emphasis on leaders being able to collaborate with others, which was also identified in the other findings. To dig a bit deeper, we explored their leadership attitudes and beliefs. In the survey, we used an instrument called the Leadership Attitudes and Beliefs Scale, which asked respondents the extent to which they agree or disagree with 28 statements. That included 14 hierarchical leadership statements, such as a leader should maintain absolute authority, and 14 systemic leadership statements, such as leadership processes involve the participation of all organizational members. We found that worldwide, the students reported more systemic than hierarchical leadership attitudes and beliefs. In the interviews, the students described how they were inspired and sought to emulate leadership role models, especially in the family, peers and teachers in school, and global youth leaders. They believed that these role models effectively demonstrated leadership, including qualities such as collaboration, ethical conduct, and service. Indeed, many of them contrasted this ideal of a leader with the idea of a boss who has absolute authority and only dictates instructions to others. We found some quite interesting findings about the perceptions and realities of an intergenerational gap regarding leadership. In the survey, we asked the teachers many of the same questions. For the quality that they believed was most important for an effective leader, the most popular answers were communication, integrity, empathy, vision, and compassion. Notably, the teachers reported higher levels of systemic leadership thinking and lower levels of hierarchical leadership thinking than the students. At the same time, in the interviews, the students perceived a significant intergenerational gap between students and adults. Adults were believed to display more hierarchical leadership thinking. But notably, this perception was mainly about adult leaders in society at large, such as those in politics and business, not necessarily about their teachers. Now, here's a nice quote from a student in Switzerland that sums up their views on leadership. The second proposition that we developed was about learning leadership, or how students build leadership. Based on our findings, we concluded leadership can be built through diverse activities in and outside the classroom that provide opportunities to experience leadership responsibilities whilst working collaboratively towards a shared objective. Although formal leadership roles and structured training can be valuable for building leadership, they may not necessarily increase leadership self-efficacy as students become more self-aware and self-critical of their abilities. The students called on schools to expand leadership opportunities and to enable all students to experience leadership. To arrive at this conclusion, in the survey, we presented the students with a long list of activities and asked them to note if they felt that they had built leadership through their participation. The top 5 activities reported by the students for building leadership were group work, projects, presentations, hobbies, and sports. In the interviews, the students discussed how leadership is built through diverse activities that provide opportunities to experience leadership responsibilities whilst working with others towards a shared objective. Notably, they really emphasized how leadership could be built irrespective of the activity, as long as it provided opportunities to practice and reflect on leadership. And this included everyday school activities such as group work, projects, and presentations. We also investigated experience of formal leadership roles and formal leadership training. In the survey, we found that around 2/5 of the students held a formal leadership role, and that included things like sports, clubs and societies, and student councils. Also, 2/5 of the students have participated in leadership training over the past year through activities such as conferences, workshops, and leadership programs. In the interviews, the students discussed how leadership roles were highly challenging, but believed that the experience was valuable for building leadership. Similarly, they believed that the experience of being guided to lead activities through leadership training was valuable for building leadership. So overall, they were very positive about leadership roles and leadership training, and indeed called for schools to offer more opportunities like these to students. Following this, we used a survey instrument to examine leadership self-efficacy, where we asked students to rate how much they agreed with statements such as, "I know a lot more than most high school students about what it takes to be a good leader." Perhaps surprisingly, leadership roles and leadership training were not significantly related to leadership self-efficacy. So those with leadership roles and leadership training did not report higher leadership self-efficacy. In the interviews, we found a couple of potential explanations. A first explanation was that the students described building leadership without holding formal leadership roles or participating in leadership training. And this included engaging in everyday class activities, such as I previously mentioned. A second explanation was that leadership roles and leadership training were part of a self-discovery process that made students more reflective and self-critical of their leadership abilities. So as they engaged with these challenging but impactful experiences, they became more self-critical of their leadership. Here's an illuminating quote from one of our participants in Tanzania about learning leadership. Moving on to our third proposition about the potential of students to lead positive change, we argue effective leadership is a learned skill that can be built by all students over time through experience. Leadership experiences should be integral to schools as they provide both personal benefits to students and enables them to contribute to others. Students have significant potential to bring about positive change. Therefore, students should be included in decision-making processes to leverage their potential to make a positive impact on schools, societies, and globally. First, in terms of who can be a leader, in the interviews, both groups of the students and the teachers were confident that all students have the potential to be effective leaders. Although they admitted that leadership comes easier to some students than others, they believe that leadership is a learned skill that is built through experience. I recall one student who discussed how they did not think that leadership was for someone like them. However, through the opportunity to experience leadership in a student association, it made them realize that actually they too can be a leader. In terms of why be a leader, in the survey, the students noted being motivated to build leadership for personal benefits, and that could be things like their personal growth, maybe their academic studies, and even their career. But it was also about contributing to their schools and societies. In the interviews, the students underlined these motivations to build leadership. They believe that young leaders have a responsibility to do better than adult leaders in their society. Indeed, many of them were quite critical of the adult leaders in their society and really felt that they could do better in leadership roles, given the opportunity. In terms of leadership for positive change, the students were enthusiastic about young people's leadership potential. They were keen to participate in decision-making processes to highlight problems, identify solutions, and drive change in schools and societies. Really important here is that this idea of leadership and making impact was not future-orientated only. It was not only about building leadership skills so they can be an effective leader as an adult and make a difference as an adult. Instead, they really wanted to make a difference now as young people, and they felt that they had significant potential to do so. Indeed, this sense of leadership extended beyond the school gates and their local communities to tackle global problems such as climate change, discrimination, and poverty. It's notable that the teachers really reinforced this idea of the leadership potential of young people by emphasizing their huge power and huge responsibility to create a better world. And here is another quote by a student who really gets at the idea about the potential of young people to make a positive impact in the world. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pass you over to Allan, who's going to talk to you about some of the implications of these research findings.
Okay, thank you, Ewan. Fascinating findings, I think everyone will agree, and so much more in them than we can hope to cover today. Let's now turn to a little bit of what this study might mean for schools, what it might mean for students in schools, for teachers, for leaders, whatever it is, based on what students talked about us. The first implication is that students stress the importance of role models for cultivating an understanding of leadership. This puts a huge onus on adults and on different age students within schools to be able to live the type of leadership that they expect and the type of leadership that they want. As we found, students are always watching, and it's not just what we say, it's what they see. So schools have a place to ensure that all adults are aware of this responsibility and that they communicate through their daily actions as well as their policies, etc., what it is that they want to see with that. We also found that given that students themselves are powerful role models, it's important that schools provide ways that students can engage not only in meaningful but in visible leadership around their own campuses. So, for example, through activities that they hold, that as the students are leading these and having input, they are highlighted, they are visible, and the other students, particularly the younger students, can see them. Second implication, we found that student leadership is built through a wide range of experiences. In other words, the ways that they learn leadership is through very different pathways. But it's not the activity itself, whether it be a sports or an arts or actually a project, an inquiry project having in the school, but it's the experience, the time that students can have to try and experience and reflect on leadership while they work together. So in other words, it's something that comes through what they do on a continual basis through their hands-on. So schools need to continue or even increase, we would suggest, real-life activities, both in classrooms, whether they're doing inquiry projects or other sorts of research, and also outside classrooms, whether it's volunteering outside the school, whether it's sports. These are the things we know that most schools don't do, but we believe that there is a place for this to be increased. And it's a way that when students do it, they need to be able to think about the leadership that they are exercising and feel like leaders. In other words, promoting leadership in the schools as a way of being. So that leads on that we need to be able to help students reflect intentionally upon the leadership that they experience, questioning, providing feedback, getting them in groups and talking about what that actually means. Third implication, students and teachers were really enthusiastic about that students can make a positive impact through leadership. And schools in particular highlighted this as a platform for students to practice leadership. So this is a belief that students actually can make a difference through their leadership. So what can schools do? Maximise student opportunity to participate in decision-making, problems, solutions at a school level, at a school/community level. Involve them in solving some of the problems that are facing the school. Don't just see them as people outside the glass, but people who can actually make a real contribution to it. So they can drive positive change in their schools, and particularly in international schools, this can flow over and help them to make a difference in their communities where needs are really necessary. And then eventually, as they go on in their careers through university and later life, they have the opportunity, they do have the power to be able to change a better world if that leadership is something that they hang on to and they realise it explicitly. So a couple of concluding remarks just to sum it up. Number one, students believe that they can make a difference to the world through their leadership. It's important that they believe this. It's important that they feel empowered to be able to do things toward a more positive future. We need to help them to see that. Number two, all students are leaders. Remember, students saw leadership in much less hierarchical terms than many adults do. So it's important that they see that everyone within their communities, not just the big and the strong, have a leadership role to play, and that they have that potential to move on to successful leadership. Three, student leadership benefits the individual and the collective. So it provides for the students individual, their person in development, but it also empowers them to contribute to the broader society, to the school, and hopefully globally as they move into those positions. We said very clearly a number of times that students learn or build this leadership through multiple pathways. So the key to meaningful learning is that students have numerous and diverse opportunities to explore, experiment upon their leadership through their time in the school. And this needs to become a way of life and built into our processes and our structures. And finally, student-school partnerships are essential for leadership learning. Students don't learn in a vacuum. And they don't just learn between, that lesson, that 1 hour lesson, or when they're in sport. It's something that goes on all the time. So a school culture needs to be nurtured and shaped in a way that these respectful partnerships come and learning leadership becomes the whole way. So thank you very much for your patience. We appreciate that. If you would like to read the full report from which this presentation was taken, please go to the website on the screen. Thank you all for tuning in today. We appreciate it.